Today we're back with more AirPort nonsense. Nice. It has a green LED, which means that it actually does work. But I made an entire video about troubleshooting this guy because, well, it didn't want to work. If you want to see the video about that, I'll have it linked right up here as well as in the description. But if you have seen that video, you'll know that there was a lot of pain and suffering. However, in the same video, we were also talking about potential upgrades. This being one of them. Now, what is a junk cable going to do in this instance? Well, by itself, it's not going to do anything. However, when we combine it with something like this, we get a free USB-powered fan. Now, we do have to do the work ourselves instead of it being ready to go, but considering this fan was just sitting around doing nothing and this cable, I'd say that's a pretty good deal. Now, the only thing that's actually being actively cooled in this setup, at least up until now, is the MacBook itself, because it's on a laptop stand and it has a fan, obviously. You might be able to hear it, but I'm not sure how audible it'll be on video. But there's also a blue LED, which you can kind of see. It really adds to the mid-2000s theme here that we're going for. Obviously, we got a 2008 MacBook, we got the wood grain, we have a mid-2000s hi-fi component setup here, and we're adding another upgrade to the system. Just like in the 2000s, this fan doesn't have any RGB, so we're going for a real budget setup, but hey, if it works, it works. Now, when it comes to mounting the fan wherever we want, we got a lot of options. Now, even though the AirPort itself wasn't designed to have active cooling, except for the very last models, it's not going to hurt, and at the very least, it might actually help prolong the life of this guy. Or at the very least, if it's not the AirPort itself, we can hook it up with the power supply to keep the power supply cool. Now, this setup is bound to change potentially in the future, so that's the benefit of it having a cable. It's not too long where it's going to be, it has to be wrapped up like this, but we do have flexibility on where we want to put it. It doesn't matter what type of application we use this fan for, whether it be to cool the AirPort or to cool the hard drive. But before we can actually do that, we have to make the modification because, well, unless you want to poke these cables into a free USB port, we can't really use it in its current state. It is hazardous to your health. So instead of doing it that way, let's do it the proper way and use up the cable. So we're going to go back to the main office setup, make the modification, come back here, and put it into service. Alright, so we got the fan, we have the cable, we have a multimeter, we have an iPhone 5S, we have an iPhone 4, and then we have all of this extra nonsense here that we're going to use. So why do we have two iPhones here? Well, this one is to show you that the charging cube is not the problem here, it's the cable. This cable technically does work, but some limitations do apply. Now, while testing it, I found out it actually will charge the iPhone 5S, but it'll do it intermittently, or sometimes it just won't charge at all. The iPhone 10 that I'm using as my camera here doesn't even see the cable. The only way it'll actually charge is if I slightly adjust it and hold it at an angle. And yeah, I'm not going to waste my time with this lightning cable whenever I already have official ones anyways. If it wasn't obvious, this is a third-party cable that has clearly been used. I don't even know, it's just some generic third party. There's no name on this or anything. So this is an official 30-pin Apple cable, and if I plug this in, you'll see that it works just fine. Even with, it's clearly been used, it does still work. Now this thing, yeah, I don't think the USB port is supposed to have this kind of damage normally. It does still fit, which is the minimum requirement in this case. While I could, in theory, just use this as a normal lightning cable, it's really not worth the hassle. And as you can see, iOS 9 is also telling us that this cable is not certified and may not work reliably. This one works without a problem. I've used it for years. This one, you can't even guarantee it'll actually charge your phone for the next minute or so. Alright, let's not waste any more time and just begin. And yeah, there's no going back now. Be careful, this is not intended to be a tutorial. Well, it doesn't look like we have a black wire, but we do have a red wire. We might have to use the shielding itself, but I will have to do some further testing to make sure that's the case. So it looks like the shielding does have a good connection, and it does connect. And the last time I tried to do this with, another cable that had this type of shielding, well, it just didn't work at all. So I'm glad to see that this does work. So I cleaned it up as best I could. It's not going to be perfect, but if it's going to be covered up anyways, it's not really that big of a deal. So I was looking at the shielding here, and I realized that if I want to make it look a little bit cleaner, I can actually take it and cut it up. So that's what I did. This was the larger one, so we can put it on both ends. And yeah, it's not 100% perfect. I tried to get it as clean as possible. And it's actually helpful in the case of the ground because it doesn't have the protective covering that the red wire has. So all that's left is just, connecting up the cables. Yeah, it seems to be pretty sturdy. Awesome. Here is the actual final result. So yeah, I wasn't a fan of how you could still see some of the cables sticking out. So as it is right now, our project is good to go. So let's go back to the AirPort Extreme and install this. So this is the current setup of the AirPort. Now, it's all right for what it is. This is how it's intended to be set up. But at the same time, I feel like there's just a lot of wasted space here. The fan itself also does make some noise whenever it's like this, but if I have some way of, actually properly putting it into position somehow, it would definitely help with the airflow even more. Or, we can always just go with this approach. I'm definitely going to have to deal with the cables one of these days, but today is not that day. I know that this update is kind of in the middle of the timeline, but I wanted to let you guys know that as of right now, it's been running for well over 4 hours, and both the AirPort and the power supply, they feel quite cool to the touch. Now, they are still a little warm in some spots because this thing can't completely cover both of them equally, but for the most part, the power supply feels like it's not even on, and the AirPort is definitely at a lower temperature. So this small addition to the setup has made a noticeable impact, and even just as it is haphazardly placed, it's doing its job, and I'm quite surprised at how well it's actually keeping the temperatures down. If you enjoyed today's video and you enjoyed seeing a project like this for, something you might not even think of adding an upgrade to, stick around because there's going to be more awesome content just like this. If you want to make sure you actually see those videos, then consider subscribing. But I think that's going to wrap up today's video. So if you've enjoyed it, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.